Redditors who've had a coworker die on the job. What happened? Had a colleague run over while attempting to stop a vehicle. I was almost killed myself but managed to avoid it by inches. No longer in the same job. I volunteer in a place where I am subject to very heavy traffic and inattentive drivers, the Burning Man entry gate, and one of our sayings is cars are real. They are. Guy appeared to be taking an after lunch nap in his chair. His office mate snuck up and pushed on him. In an attempt to scare him awake, the guy fell out of his chair. He had been dead at least 15 minutes from an aneurysm. I then learned that when someone dies like that at work, protocol is to rearrange all the furniture in the office before reopening it for normal use. Work for Turnpike Toll Plaza. I was in the booth and saw my co-worker walking in for lunch. Looked away for a second and heard a loud thump. Guy didn't stop and blew through the gate. We all ran out try to see what happened. Co-worker ended up 20 feet up on the roof of the building. His toll was only 50 cents. My assistant worked less than full time and would regularly work from home on things that weren't pressing. So one day, someone from another department comes up to me and asks, "Hey, where's Jeff?" I emailed him some things and I haven't heard back from him. So I explained that it was not unlike him to miss emails on days when he was working from home and that it probably wasn't a big deal. So they come back a few hours later. I tried calling Jeff, but no answer. I kinda need him to answer those emails today. Side note, we worked in a corporate office space Y environment, so missing an important email was kinda a thing. So I called his personal phone, no answer. Text him, no answer. Since he was my assistant, I knew where he lived. So I call my wife and ask her to drop by his place to see if he's home. Jeff would sometimes drive out to the desert on his days off and be out of cell range. So she goes over there and she calls back, sobbing, "Jeff is dead." Turns out, at age 37, he had a heart attack at his computer. After dealing with the police, they gave my wife his cell phone. Turns out he was answering that work email and died halfway through it. Despite not being full-time, Jeff was really well liked around the office and had a reputation for being a jokester. So it was really tough losing him around the office. Lost a good energy, especially in such a corporate environment. The corporate grief counselor came and talked to anyone who wanted to chat. It was strange how many people went to talk to the counselor, even people I didn't think he worked with very closely, and I would know, as I managed his tasks. His funeral was out of town, so only I attended, but we had a little wake at my house for work friends. A bonfire cookout thing that he would have liked where we told stories about him, etc. I had to pack up his desk. I ended up giving most things to his parents, but there were a few work desk doodads that I gave to his work friends. We named part of our technical document library after him, the Jeff Memorial Bookshelf, which he would have thought was silly and fun. As a final note, I put a picture of him in our marketing materials. Just a picture of him working on a job site. But our department all thought it was cool to have him in there. Our materials don't get updated very often, so he'll be in it for years. I'm a baseball umpire and I work mostly college and some high school games. An umpire who was working behind home plate was stabbed in the neck by a broken wooden bat and died. Actually was the person I replaced. Got hit by a bus on her way home. Now we literally have a if I ever get hit by a bus rule, where basically everyone has to know how to do everyone else's job, in case someone gets hit by a bus. Highway construction. Young man who I had trained for 8 years and was set to take over my position was riding as a spotter on a piece of equipment. Totally legit. Nothing shady or unsafe. Machine crested a hill and the transition from pulling to pushing caused the drive line to fail and subsequently tear the brake lines out. Halfway down the hill, operator told him to bail out. Landed on his feet, but off balance. Fell backwards, striking the base of his skull on newly poured curb. Crushed the top 2 vertebrae and completely severed his spinal cord. We did CPR until life flight got there. He lasted 2 days on the vent. He was 27 with 3 beautiful girls, one he never got to meet face to face. I miss Hector every day, and it's been 9 years. A woman once jumped off our 22 floor, I think, building to her death. She was extremely depressed and left children behind. She jumped toward the front of the building and her body was splattered near the front revolving doors. Our CEO at the time ran down and covered her remains with his suit jacket while waiting for first responders. In the Navy, a friend in another division went up on deck at night to retrieve a piece of equipment and didn't come back, lost over the side. High-rise window cleaner here. My co-worker and friend fell to his death. Was my boss and came into my office and was digging around in a file cabinet. She had been complaining about feeling nauseous and I jokingly asked if she was pregnant. She was in her 50s and it was her go-to question to me because I was newly married. She told me to kiss her butt and then looked at me really funny. She went down like a sack of potatoes and had had a massive heart attack and was dead in 2 minutes. I thought she was messing with me, so it took me a moment to jump up and see about her. I called 911 and tried CPR, but she was gone. They pronounced her in my office. I feel bad. Her kids wanted to know if she said anything and I didn't have the heart to tell them that Anne's last words were kiss my butt, so I left all of that out. A fellow social worker was chased through a field and shot in the head by a client. That was a rough time. My Nordstrom co-worker was shot point blank in the store on Black Friday by her ex-boyfriend. Michigan Ave Chicago location. Worked at a zoo. Happened after I had left for the day, but one of the elephant keepers got crushed to death. We were one of the few zoos that were allowed by the ASA to have free contact with the female elephants. In other words, the keepers could be in the exhibit with them to clean, do training, or whatnot. Anyway, they were walking one of the females back into the barn at the end of the day, one keeper in front and one in behind just like they always do. They think something spooked the elephant, but she rammed her head into the keeper in front, smashing her into one of the metal barricades. She made it to the hospital, but passed away shortly thereafter from massive internal bleeding. One of the guys I worked with was still at work when it happened and rushed to the barn when they announced the emergency over the radio. He said he knew she was gone the moment he saw her. Things were rough in the time after that. 2 brothers were in charge of the elephants. One is the curator and the other the lead keeper. They had both worked with elephants for a very long time and were extremely passionate about what they did and spent countless hours in their conservation efforts. They treated those elephants like their family. The brother that was the lead keeper was the other keeper walking behind the elephant. He quit not long after and no longer works with animals. The curator left a couple years later. They said that the elephant knew that she had done something wrong and acted upset for a time afterward. Just a sad story all around. He got backed over by a large wheel dozer used for compaction. He was wearing headphones and didn't hear the backup siren. This was literally on the Friday before Christmas, about an hour before quitting time. Paychecks with bonuses were being handed out. It was pretty brutal. Yes, he was wearing headphones when he shouldn't have, but still. Can't imagine having to tell his family this literally 2 days before Christmas. Is on the way to the job count. Started a new job. On Monday told this gentleman would be my boss for first half of training. He's on vacation Monday, met him briefly Tuesday and scheduled a meeting with him for Wednesday. His fiance also worked there and she stepped in to train me Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday I walk in, everyone is crying and fiance is being led out by cops. He was hit head on driving into work. Brain dead. She was going to hospital to say goodbye and pull the plug. Rest of that week was spent pretending to look busy since I wasn't really trained in anything and the people that knew the job best were either dead or out of office. The CEO and I arrived early one morning. We walked into the employee locker room and found a long time and much liked employee lying on the tile floor dead, face up, with a pool of blood around his head from the impact of his fall against the hard surface. He had suffered a major heart attack and just died there, alone. I work on aircraft. Certain instruments have air vacuum powered gyroscopes inside. They make a kinda turbo spool up whirring noise if you blow into them, which you should never do. This guy decided to use our 120C shop air to get this thing zipping up as high as possible. The gyro came out of its cage, shot straight into his neck. He bled out almost instantaneous. I was an aerial news photojournalist. The helicopter for the other station crashed. Pilot and photog were killed. All the stations were up at the time covering a shooting, including the one I was in. We covered the crash but didn't know it was them until a few minutes in. All anyone knew at the time was that there was an aircraft down. It was a sad day. This happened in Houston around 2007 or 8. Not strictly a co-worker, but a contact with one of our clients that we worked with frequently. He worked at a certain transit agency and had over 40 years experience. They went on strike a few years ago and he and another guy took that opportunity to go look at some problematic areas of track while the trains weren't running. According to the safety rules, one person was supposed to be a lookout while the other looked at the track. The theory is that they were complacent because of the strike and were both looking at something with the track. Some managers decided to move a train back to the storage yard for safekeeping during the strike. Both men were killed on impact. This happened about 3 months ago. A co-worker took his lunch and didn't come back. We later heard that he was shot while he was eating in his car. It was about 11 AM. I was sitting on my couch when Linda from work called. Well, Gina didn't show up today. Yeah, thinking, so you want me to come in? And before you hear it on the news, I wanted to tell you, she was murdered. Gina was a pharmacy tech at the clinic I worked at. She was engaged to be married and our last conversation was about her upcoming honeymoon at Disney. She had been up-head and murdered by her M-head neighbor. When she didn't show up, the other pharmacy tech, whose husband's brother was Gina's fiancé, called her dad to check on her. She was so excited about her wedding. She was 28 and still a virgin because she was saving that for her husband. Her father found her on her living room floor, naked and almost decapitated. Dude was taking lots of steroids, his liver crapped out, and he died at 22, leaving a kid behind. I consider this a work thing, because it's all the rage in work camps to take steroids, work out in the camp gym most non-working hours, and try to be the biggest guy in camp. We were in Kuwait. Someone told him to shut the gate. He pulled it past the support frame that was holding it up and it fell on him. It was very big and very heavy. He was 19. Used to be a cell tower climber on summers away from college. I saw many serious injuries but only one death. My climb partner was hanging underneath a crow's nest, the mesh platform on top of the tower, running a line along a pipe while I fed it to him. As he was shifting position, his grip failed and he fell. He was caught by his climb harness, but as it stretched to absorb the impact, he smashed into an antenna array below us. He was dead on impact. All I could do was sit with him until my boss climbed up to help me lower the body down. He died on the phone with a customer while in a call queue. The customer hung up mad and he continued to get calls. It took over a dozen customers calling in mad before management took notice. He was very gone when the paramedics arrived. I only know that as I was taking calls as they tried their best to bring him back. Flight attendant friend of mine had an elderly lady die on her flight. Said she was very sweet. Mentioned she was on her way to see her grandkids. Took a nap and didn't wake up. A family member works at an oil refinery. A few years ago, one of his co-workers committed suicide by jumping from the top of one of the huge crude oil tanks. Apparently, he just lost his house and was broke, and he thought by jumping, it would be a workplace accident, and his family would receive life insurance benefits. I don't know how they were certain it was a suicide, but the insurance did not pay. I used to work at a restaurant at a private luxurious resort. After starting work there, I heard about a dishwasher that died of a heart attack. They just put a tablecloth over him and kept the restaurant open. They called ambulance after closing. Employees were very upset, so they sent everyone an apology letter. My friend was a gym instructor. I paid her a visit, and while watching her lead a warm-up class she did the circular neck roll. She did it a few times and then got a little quicker, too quick. She messed something up between her first and second vertebrae, snapped her spinal cord, died 2 weeks later from complications. My friend, he was in his 80s, was on top of a 9-foot ladder getting something for a customer and something shifted in the racking. It hit him in the chest and flipped him off the ladder head first into the concrete floor. At my first job out of college, a guy on night shift OD'd on H that his boss sold him. Next week, everyone got to pee in a cup, and about 1/3 of the employees got let go. Not quite at work, but was training a guy at a local restaurant I worked at. It was casual fine dining and this kid couldn't handle one table on his last night of training and eventually could barely speak. He was so strung out on some sort of pills or something. He got fired in the middle of the shift. He went home and proceeded to OD not 12 hours later. A few months later, when opening a second location, I almost had the exact same thing happen with the exact same manager on duty. I don't think that guy OD'd though. Worked in a foundry in Illinois and they used to have a crazy system where they used huge cranes for their ladles and continuously needed forklifts on the second tier known as the melt deck to tend to their furnaces. The crane operator would pick up the forklift with a driver inside. Evidently the previous shift didn't apply the safety stop for the cables for the crane. The crane operator went past tension capacity while going too far up, causing the cable to break and the hoist latch, weighing 860 lbs, fell and crushed the driver and forklift. I was working at a Dell kiosk in a mall with this girl who was like 4'8" and less than 90 pounds soaking wet. Like you could literally carry her on your shoulder like a parrot. One day while talking to some people trying to make a sale, her words just started slurring out of nowhere, and then she looked straight at me and fell down dead on the spot. Had a bit of trouble getting over that one for a while. Receptionist at our veterinary hospital stole a lockbox key, grabbed a crap ton of injectable sedatives, shot them up and slammed into a telephone pole on the way home. Left 4 kids behind. Had a guy almost die in one of our giant warehouse freezers at my old job. He slipped and fell while inside. He went in without a buddy on the outside, so it took like 30 minutes for someone to find him, as we do our best to minimize going in and out of the giant freezers. My mom's one of 4 managers in her office, and they all had to drive to a meeting at a different office. About a half hour into their drive, a car they were passing blew a tire and swerved into them. The guy sitting next to my mom died in the back seat. My mom was hurt really bad, and the other 2 in front were hurt but not too seriously. This was a couple years ago now, but she's still shook up about it and has had lots of pain complications since. Does a client count? We had a farming client who was a bit of a loner. We were scheduled to see him first thing Monday, but he never showed up. Didn't answer the phone, wasn't there when we sent a neighbor around, just seemed like he had vanished. After a thorough search of his farm, the cops found him dead under his tractor. They deduced that he had been sitting underneath the tractor working on the engine while it was running, and it had driven forward slightly, pushing him forward and basically folding him in half. The worst part was that they thought he was probably alive like that for several days, and eventually his heart just gave out. You have been visited by the distinguished doggo of delicious delicacies. Comment tasty supper, pupper, and be blessed with delectable dishes for the next decade. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.